President Biden and Donald Trump are sharpening their attacks against each other. In a new ad titled "Character Matters," the Biden campaign slams the former president as a convicted criminal. In battleground Michigan over the weekend, the former president boasted about his legal troubles while targeting the president on inflation and the border.
I'm the only one in history who got indicted and my numbers went up. I'm the only one in history who got impeached and my numbers went up.
Next hour, the former president hosting Republican Speaker Mike Johnson at Mar-a-Lago in Florida as he solidifies his grip over the Republican Party. The jockeying to be Trump's vice president continues, with Senator Marco Rubio helping with debate prep and Congressman Byron Donalds getting teased a bit by the former president on Saturday.
Would you like to be VP? Huh? Tell you one thing, it'd be a good one, too.
And at a star-studded Democratic fundraiser over the weekend, President Biden and former President Obama painting Donald Trump as a major threat.
The next president is likely to have 2 new Supreme Court nominees. 2 more. He's going to appoint 2 more flying flags upside down. The Supreme Court has never been as out of kilter as it is today.
Joining us now, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard and Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale and New York Times reporter Jeremy Peters. So, Vaughn, President Biden and Trump are drawing their battle lines. How are they trying to frame their opponent ahead of the first debate next week?
Right, Jose, we're just 10 days away from that first presidential debate down in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of the refrains that we should expect from President Biden was what you just heard him articulate at that L.A. fundraiser, the fact that another Trump administration could very well lead to 2 conservative Supreme Court justices nominated by Donald Trump. Of course, during his first administration, he nominated and successfully was able to place 3 conservative Supreme Court justices on the bench. But you should also expect Joe Biden to focus on the idea that the progress that was made under the Democratic administration would be rolled back as promised by Donald Trump, and that the U.S.'s role in the global order could come into question with allies who have heard Donald Trump repeatedly over the last 2 years call into question U.S. aid and resources, not only going to Russia, but to Ukraine, but potentially to support other allies of the United States, even in other NATO members, in the event that Russia were to invade and use aggression to go on the attack militarily. But also, for Donald Trump, you should expect next week for him to focus on immigration and the contrast between his administration and the Biden administration, as well as the price on goods under the Biden administration, particularly over the last 3 years. What we expect next week in Atlanta, number one, no crowd. CNN has rolled out the agreements that both sides, both camps made. That will include no studio audience. The microphones of the individual whose time it is not to speak will be turned off while the other individual is speaking. There will be no props allowed, so nobody will be able to bring a notebook onto stage with pre-written notes. Instead, they'll be given a pad of paper and can make those notes as they go along. They will also be provided water. This is going to be 90 minutes, 2 commercial breaks. Both men are not going to be able to talk to their 2 campaign teams during those 90 minutes, Jose.
So, Ali, meanwhile, Trump is hosting Speaker Mike Johnson in Mar-a-Lago today. What do we know about this meeting? And what's the latest on the race to be Trump's running mate?
The former president clearly trying to show that he has power over his party. He did that last week in his first appearance back here on Capitol Hill since the January 6th insurrection he fomented. By and large, the people in that room called it a pep rally of sorts, both on the House and Senate side of the building. Sources tell me that the meeting that the former president is having at Mar-a-Lago with the speaker and the head of the NRCC, which is effectively the House's campaign arm in charge of keeping the majority for House Republicans here. This meeting is supposed to be a continuation of sorts of the meeting that Trump had with the full House Republican conference last week. Now, of course, he's doing it with 2 senior leadership members as they try to chart a path forward towards another House Republican majority here on the House side. Of course, on the Senate side of this building, they're also trying to take back that majority. As far as the veep stakes go, though, you've got people on both sides of Congress, House and Senate, vying for that position, hearing from several of them over the course of the last few days as they try to audition of sorts on television. Watch.
Donald J. Trump is leading in polls all over, every time a poll comes out.
He's committed, he's smart, he's funny. He's nothing like he's portrayed in the press.
The bottom line is we need a visionary leader, and I believe that Donald Trump is that visionary leader.
And look, we've all covered the former president for a while. Praise will get you everywhere, or at least in this case, somewhere in these ongoing Veep stakes. We're watching the ways that these potential vice presidential contenders are trying to get on TV as much as they can. We know that image and what happens in the media matters greatly to the former president. And in our conversations with people who are close to this Veep stakes process, it looks like the more that we see of these folks on TV, the more that could have impact on their actual standing in this ongoing Veep stakes contest as it continues down through the convention when we expect the former president to make his pick, Jose.
Yeah, and Jeremy, going back to what we were discussing with Vaughn about, President Biden being asked during his campaign event about the Supreme Court. Do you think the Supreme Court could be an issue that could motivate people to come out in November?
I think, Jose, that it is much more of a galvanizing factor for Democrats this time around, not just because of Roe v. Wade being overturned, but because you have the possibility that should Clarence Thomas or Alito retire, who are in their advanced age, in their 70s, that would give Donald Trump the opportunity to appoint more young conservatives, therefore solidifying the conservative majority on the court for another 2 generations or so. I think, though, that the issue of the court for Republicans is a little more complicated because this will be the first time in a half a century, basically, that Roe v. Wade won't be a motivating factor for them. And we saw in 2022 when Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed, and that really, cemented the Republican majority at conservative majority at 6-3 on the court. The Republicans didn't do so well in those midterms because Coney Barrett, of course, was confirmed right before those midterms. And I've heard, some Republican strategists say that had, a little bit of an impact on voter enthusiasm. One of them said to me at the time that, conservatives, social conservatives, religious conservatives, after the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation felt, quote, fat, happy, and lazy. So, without Roe v. Wade, the court isn't as much of a factor for Republicans. Now, as for the issue of abortion, I will say I think it's a little bit more complicated than people are making it out to be. In states like Arizona and Wisconsin, where it very much is in play as a political issue, I think Democrats will be energized by it. But in other states like Michigan, where it's basically taken off the table because they have already protected abortion rights, I think it's less of a motivating factor.